Hey everyone, welcome to the Cube Skills community coming at you live here on YouTube on October 17th. If you're in the chat, say hello. Tell us where you're tuning in from today. Would love to hear from you. Cube Skills is a community for everyone to join and collaborate with others to learn containers and Kubernetes. Today we're joined by Robert Strand. Robert is an Azure MVP, HashiCorp Ambassador, CNCF Ambassador, fellow CNCF Ambassador. Principal Cloud Engineer at Amesto 42, Board Chair of the Cloud Native Norway, Board Member of the DevOps Norway, Co-Founder and Events Organizer at Azure Cloud Native, Maintainer of Open GitOps, also Co-Chair of the Platforms Working Group at CNCF, Founder of Norwegian PowerShell User Group, and also do some independent consultant. I don't know how you fit that in, but Robert, welcome to the show. Appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me. You can really tell that I have an issue saying no to things when you start listing it up like that. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, good to have you. I obviously listed all the things that you're working on. You're very busy. I did a little research on you and realized that you're approaching about a decade in your career of doing all the things. Is that right?
Yeah, this is my 9th year, I have to think. Yes, which is not really that long in terms of career wise. It's especially considering the age. So I'm 36, and I started a little bit late. I started working more or less when I was 27.
Yeah, it's not a lot of time to do all that work. How'd you fit it in, and what was the process like to get ramped up?
Well, I guess the secret is that I went unemployed for like 10 years. No, sorry, I keep on saying that. I meant to say I was a musician for 10 years. So after a while, I just figured out that I can't just try to make music work. Very few people can make music work.
Yeah.
And I always loved like computers and stuff like that. I think first time I installed Linux, I was like 13. I built my first computer when I was 9, like the typical nerd thing, playing games, all those things. So I figured that is, people always told me to get into IT, but I didn't listen to them. So maybe I'll try that. And I was just lucky. Like I have no education at all. There's no reason for me to be in IT except that I knew someone who had a local company where I'm from, Tromsø, which is pretty far north in Norway. There's not a whole lot going on up there. So just simply lucky to know someone and got my foot in the door. And soon thereafter I figured out there was things like the Microsoft MVP awards and things like that, and I kind of wanted to do more than just work. So I dedicated a whole lot of time. I guess that is the answer to that, and just started taking certifications, learning everything I could about everything, which is probably not a great thing. So you have the T-shaped engineers, like a thin like base, and then something is specialized. I'm like a V-shaped. I know too much about things I don't work with.
Yeah, I know a little bit about everything kind of engineer. So
yeah,
I definitely understand that. It sounds like earlier in your career, in your IT career, I should say, there was, you said you knew somebody and they kind of took a chance on you, or gave you a chance in some way or another.
Yeah.
How important do you think is kind of having that network, or those types of people that give you a chance? And did that lead you to then kind of pay it forward and do that for other people as well?
I think so. So it's as someone who's kind of like an introvert, and we have a term in Norwegian which literally translates to like being outside of society. I have no clue what that should be supposed to be in English, but there's a group of people who kind of don't belong in society. They're just like not part of it. They're sitting at home doing nothing. That was what I was doing. So like getting that exposure is starting to kind of get the snowball rolling, I guess. I wouldn't have been able to do what I do now if it weren't for that. And I've even at the first place where I worked, it was apprentice and things like that, juniors that I've helped teach, and I kind of been doing that in all my jobs. So I quickly understood that teaching and speaking on these topics really helped me understand things better. And now that I have an extensive network of people, like I could probably get in touch with anyone in any big company right now, just because I've just been out there speaking to a lot of people. And my my career is kind of safe, you could say.
Yeah.
So that is networking is a hard skill to learn if you're not used to it, which I guess no one is at some point. But it's very important. Being out there and kind of helping helping the world go around, because basically everything that we do is in some form or another built on other people's generosity.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have things like Linux, and basically half the internet, or 80% or 90% of the internet wouldn't be there. The internet wouldn't be a thing if people weren't eager to share and get something up and running that. So we will, I don't know where we would be if people weren't interested in sharing and building things.
Yeah, that is interesting that you mentioned kind of that level of comfort that you reach when you establish that network and know that the job that you have is if it goes away tomorrow, or if something happens, you could always rely on that network.
Yeah.
What would you say to people who are just kind of starting out developing that network, and trying to put themselves out there both in their practices, so building a portfolio, or trying to add to their resume, and also kind of develop that network to where they have that comfort where they can go to somebody and say, hey, I need a job, or I could use some help.
I think in general. Oh, by the way, if people hear, I have a dog that just reacted to something. So yeah, I have a little guard dog. Work from home syndrome, I guess you call that. It's either babies or dogs. I would say that I think it's really important, and especially if you're supposed to have a career in one of these domains that is kind of the this is knowledge based, right? This is knowledge. We do knowledge work. It's not, well, it can be physical as well, but it's not one of the things where if you just show up and just do the things you're told, everything's going to be fine. You would have to keep up to date with things. You would have to be involved in things to make sure that you are still relevant in some form or fashion. And getting that mentality as early as possible, I think, is a really good idea. Most people that I know that has any successful career usually is part of like the network of the IT people. Everyone knows each other, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. What was that process like for you, and how did you put yourself out there and make those connections?
So when I was in the north of Norway, that was really hard. There's not a lot of things happening. I think I worked in IT for 4 or 5 years up there, and I went to 3 or 4 different meetups. So not a lot of things happening. Again, a small city with like 70. It's the biggest one in the north of Norway, but compared to everywhere else, it's nothing. So and the IT industry obviously is even smaller. So not a whole lot of people that want to kind of have go out and have those kind of meetups and so on and so forth. So it was not until I moved to Oslo, which I did during COVID, so everything locked down. Oh, wow. And then everything started being virtual, right? So I wanted to move to Oslo. I've been to more events in Oslo when I didn't live there than back home. So that was one of the reasons why I moved, having that like network of people. And again, I had relatively high aspirations and kind of wanted to be something more than just someone who works in IT. So I kind of have to go here and do stuff. But then everything closed and everything became virtual. So, I became an MVP during COVID, just simply because I then could speak at conferences in India, but virtually.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. So I think for me it was, and it was really tough at least to start because I didn't know anyone. And showing up at these things when you don't know anyone is tough, like no matter who you are. It's just like showing up and hoping that people are nice and going out of your comfort zone. It's not really that fun. So if you have a friend that works in IT, ask if they can come along, so you at least have someone to talk to.
Yeah. Has being involved in open source contributed to that at all? And building those connections, working with other people who are working on the same projects.
Yeah, so the first real open source work that I did was being part of the then GitOps working group in the CNCF. And I simply kind of just stumbled across GitOps and liked it, and then just happened to look at what kind of working groups that were active really at the start of the working groups. I wasn't part of founding the group, but I was there really early. And then just like figuring out how to join these meetings and all this, that's a tough one in CNCF. There's a lot of things going on everywhere, but just like jumping into a virtual meeting with a bunch of people, it was kind of scary. I think I know the OpenSSF, which I'm also doing things in, usually have like an set agenda point for the start. Like, are there any, like they say, are there any new friends here? Like if you want to introduce yourself and kind of have that very open mindset that people can just show up from anywhere. Everything's virtual. So just getting out there and starting that, I think, helped me, because I saw that it's not really that scary, and most people that are in that space, they want to connect with people. That is part of what they do. They connect with people and try to make things better. And so usually if you work in open source or work with open source in any shape or form, people are nice. It's not like you're going to get there and get yelled at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I've heard it's quite the opposite, in terms of, the people that are those consistent contributors are really nice. It's actually a really a comforting and good group to be a part of. But you have those occasional people who come in and say, there's something wrong with this. You need to fix this, and come in with like a wrecking ball. And how have you dealt with those types of people before, and how do you kind of weed those people out?
It is when everything is open for anyone to join, you're obviously gonna get some people that's gonna join and believe that it's one of the the entire when you start, you know that you don't know anything, and at the end, when you are an actual expert, you know that you don't know everything, and you need to listen to other people to understand stuff more. And then there's the middle part where you think you know everything. There's a lot of those people, obviously. And they are tough to deal with, but I know that there's some projects that I've been part of where there have been people like that. And as a group have been handled in a way where it is always difficult telling people to you need to calm down. Don't be a douche, because everyone's different. Like, what's considered being a douche for me is not necessarily what some other people think is douchey. That's just how you have to deal with people at some point. And it is what it is. Like I said, it's open for everyone to join, so anyone can join. And there's always someone that thinks they know everything. Some people do know everything, obviously, but are nice enough to kind of, explain it in a fashion that makes sense. And some lack that skill. That's just how it is. Dealing with those, I don't think there's a set answer to that. It kind of depends on the situation and the group that you're in, I think.
Yeah, IT has never been known for having good people skills.
It is the typical like nerd thing not to have those that type of
emotional regulation. Yeah.
Absolutely.
But yeah, that is a skill in itself, which we all could learn a lot about. I know myself included. It's always it's always a from both ends of it. It's always tough trying to have those difficult conversations, and then also it's also tough to word things in a way that could potentially not harm someone or not harm someone, but offend them in any way.
Yeah, and everyone's different. There's I usually just say like you can't really tell what people are thinking. Like it's hard. You can only control yourself. And I have ADHD, and one of the side effects or things that one can experience with ADHD is something called emotional dysfunctionality, where if you get sad, you get depressed, or if you should be mildly annoyed, you get angry.
Yeah.
You can't. It's and it's kind of weird. It's just like you think afterwards, like why did I get pissed off? But there's no reason to get pissed off, and I'm aware of that. But even then, it's hard to control yourself, and people have different challenges and stuff like that. So you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt if people act rude because you suggested something or something like that. They might just be like that always. There might be a now thing. They might have had a bad day. Like who knows? That's unfortunately part of being part of this world.
Part of being a human, yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately. I wish it was easier, but it's not.
Yeah. So coming into it as a beginner or getting into open source, it can be intimidating. You have these people that are maybe not being the nicest in whatever way. You have these people who are kind of excelling. They seem to be making the most contributions and committing the most. How do you work your way in there, and how do you make that first successful create that first successful PR or work on that first issue? How would you approach it?
I think it's also important to remember that not everything open source is necessarily code. Contributing means a lot of things, and it could mean contributing documentation. So that's kind of my first public pull request or whatever you want to call it was to the Microsoft Docs when that was open source, like changing the Microsoft documentation on certain things and going through that process. So there's a lot of places you can contribute. I would say that most open source projects have that are at least serious. Serious open source projects have some sort of contribution guide. So if there's code to be contributed, there's usually a process for that, and it's relatively easy. And the main issue I think most people have is that it's where do you even start? There's if you look at open source projects, there might be thousands, if not 10,000s of open issues, and you kind of just look at it and go like, I don't where So again, it kind of depends if you're in a project in the CNCF. They usually have meetings schedule in some sort of cadence. Go in, be part of those meetings at the start, kind of get a feel for the people who are working on that project and how what they want to prioritize, and obviously volunteer. You might, if you're not, a seasoned developer, or even if you are, you might also want to pair up with someone that's been on the project for a while, just to have someone to work on an issue with and kind of get that feedback. But in general, it's it's the typical, most issues on GitHub that is easy to solve is marked with like good first issue and those kind of things, just to get a ball rolling. Get everything set up locally so you can, check and test the code and all those things, all the technical aspects of it. You can take a relatively easy issue and to do that, to get into it.
Yeah, I think they have certain issues tagged as good first issue.
Yeah,
I would recommend that.
And now that it's Hacktober, there's a lot of you can participate in that, get T-shirts and stuff like that from DigitalOcean, and there's a lot of issues or projects that are marked as Hacktober projects where they explicitly put in issues that are easy to solve so people can get involved. So if you haven't contributed to open source, this is the month where everything's kind of like aligned for you to get into it. So the Hacktoberfest from DigitalOcean in full effect now. A lot of things there, how to contribute to open source. There's a lot of different people having different kind of meetups and events where they talk about this and help guide people. So yeah, perfect timing to get into open source.
Yeah. I always tell people to jump right in, like you said, join the meetings, find someone who could help you. I think you'll find a lot of people are more than willing to help guide you, and along with reading the contribution guide can give you some hints as to next steps and where to go and how to get involved. And also, like you said, it's not just code. You can contribute to documentation. You can contribute to a lot of different working groups. You can, do events. You can do a lot of different things, especially in the CNCF. There's really endless possibilities, no matter what your level of technical expertise is.
Yeah. So the way that I got introduced to CNCF is, like I said, the GitOps working group, which then became the Open GitOps project. So it's a project now. And as soon as I started join those meetings, the topic was to create the GitOps principles, the definition basically of GitOps. So one of the first things that I participated in was actually defining GitOps. So, whenever people say GitOps in a wrong fashion, I am one of the sources of what GitOps is. And just having that, it's not necessarily like an ego thing, but it's a really cool thing to be able to, if you talk to someone and they ask, so do you know GitOps? And it's like, yeah, I literally define GitOps, being able to say, like, point towards something and kind of not being subject matter expert, but at least being one of the people that are passionate about a certain topic and join. So the GitOps principles, that's not code. There's 4 principles, and we spent like 6+ hours on each of them debating how to word it so that it's really concise and not up for interpretation. So it's like a very specific thing. That was a lot of work, and getting that in was a lot of work. But then also the platform's white paper, the CNCF platform's white paper, those kind of things are also open source and are really great use for someone. Like defining what a platform is, and there's wording in that white paper that I now use when I hold talks on platform engineering, and I see other people are doing that as well, and it kind of becomes like a something to reference when you're in the line of work that I'm in.
Mhm.
Again, it's not code, but it's really important work, and it requires a lot of knowledge, and it requires a lot of people to come together and create something that is of use to other people.
Yeah. So besides people that you can talk to, or projects that you can get involved with, and kind of jumping in with both feet, so to speak,
Mm.
what are some other ways in which open source projects have contributed to your career as an engineer, and maybe offered a experience that you had never experienced before, or offered a, I don't know, technical solution or technical
Mm.
problem that you had never come across before?
It is, you get exposed to a lot of people talking about a lot of different things in these projects, and it's a uh, it certainly is like a deep dive into technical things when you work on a technical open source project, or even not. Like I said, the open GitOps project is, or the open GitOps, the GitOps working group, which I at the start really kind of helped me to go from a like get a grasp of something like GitOps to not necessarily only know like deeply how GitOps work, but also be in touch with the people who maintain Flux and Argo, like actually knowing those people and kind of getting that insight if I need anything. Again, the networking is very a big part of it, or having the option to reach out and figure out these things that most other people would just have to experiment and try to figure out. I think it's the community aspect that kind of is what I take away from open source. The fact that you, like I said, just getting together and deep diving into a certain topic, being part of, for instance, in at KubeCon Amsterdam, being on the GitOps panel discussions, so speaking in front of a lot of people with Flux and Argo maintainers, and doing those kind of things, and that community feel. I think is kind of the main thing for me when it comes to open source in general.
Yeah.
And again, we wouldn't have anything if it was for open source, like literally.
Yeah, that's true. Has open source contributed to your daily job and you working with customers?
Yeah. So we, for instance, the company that I work for, MS242, is open source first. We are gonna everything that we are gonna write that doesn't have any customer specific things in it is all gonna be open source. So when we create services or tools and stuff like that, that's gonna be open source. I've gotten a lot of it sounds like a salesperson, but got a lot of leads from people that have attended talks that I held, and I usually hold them on open source things, or looked into to try to figure out who they could ask questions on GitOps or Kubernetes or any of the things that I work on. It's opened a lot of possibilities for me when it comes to again, it's for me, it's job safety, and it's kind of funny because I posted on Slack and I got kind of feedback on the being working in open source now is kind of not in jeopardy, but it's kind of like the Wild West out there right now for various reasons. And HashiCorp, stop being open source all of a sudden. There's not a lot of money now, or people are at least more aware that the after effects of COVID is kind of hitting IT, budgets getting cut, and all those kind of things. I think it's always been hard working 100% in open source. If open source is the one thing you're doing, that is going to be hard. If you can at least be in a company that values open source and allows you to contribute to open source. But obviously, you have to kind of balance that out with, doing good for the company. So now that, for instance, like OpenTofu became a thing, a lot of companies that make money of people running Terraform could or actively, I guess, donated, not donated, but kind of set of time for their engineers to work on the OpenTofu project. So their job is working in open source, but the open source kind of fuels the company in some way or form. So, if you are an individual contributor, open source, and you create a project and hope that that's going to sustain you, that gets tough, and you would have to be a real special person to get that to work, I think. But there's plenty of companies that value open source and ensure that you can focus on it. So you can not have best of both worlds necessarily, but at least some sort of balance there. So you don't, I wouldn't work at a place where they literally said from 8 to 4. Well, if they said 8 to 4, I wouldn't be there even. But if they said like 8 to 4, you're working on our things. Period. You're not allowed to, community stuff. All those. I wouldn't be working there. That doesn't work for me.
Yeah. What kind of projects are you involved in right now that either directly relate to open source or tangentially related?
Yeah, so we're building platform tools. The idea was to build on Kubernetes and Terraform. Now, obviously, that is a little bit in flux, so to speak. So not 100% where we land, but we're going to create platform tools. Basically, think instead of having a platform team, we want to create those kind of tooling that you can use. Mainly because we don't want to necessarily be directly like consultants. We want to be able to say we have a platform engineering team and all the tools are ready. You want Kubernetes up and running in a secure fashion with all the delivery methods and everything like that settle. Just like flip a switch. All right. So that is kind of what we're building, and we're creating a lot of security stuff. Not a whole lot of them are open source yet. We have to figure out a good way to do that in open source, obviously, because again, if it's security related, it's kind of hard to find a balance between transparency and not being secure. But in general, I do a lot of Terraform. We'll see if that becomes OpenTofu stuff later on. I'm not 100% sure where we're going to go with that. But I'm looking forward to see what the OpenTofu project can contribute. And so, yeah, I work with a lot of different customers with infrastructure as code and security in the form of like container security and Kubernetes, obviously. So basically everything that I work with is open source. All the tools that I'm using are open source, well, except Terraform now. So that kind of, and that's also why it's inspiring for me, or I want to, for instance, join like the Kubernetes project and those kind of things, because again, it's my tools, so I want to contribute back to those set of tools and do more with that.
Yeah. Any you mentioned OpenTofu, but any other projects that are kind of new in the space? I'm thinking like AI tools, since AI is a hot topic again. Any of those sorts of projects caught your eye?
Well, I were at the start at least part of the Case GPT project. Unfortunately for me, I like I said, I keep on saying yes to everything. I have to cut stuff out at some point just to make everything go around. So the Case GPT project is one of those. If I had more time, I would work with that. It's a really cool project in itself. Just being able to run a tool against a Kubernetes cluster and and it does two things really. It looks at different resources and detects if stuff is, you know, wrong. So getting all those kind of error messages and event logs and so on and so forth, which in itself for me is useful, right? Instead of having to go through these things manually, I can just, like, you know, run the command and get that. So that in itself is useful. But the cool part is that you can use -- explain, and either having a open AI backend, or for instance Azure OpenAI, or there's also different models that you can use. You can send that and get an explanation back, what is going on, and actually also get back, this is how you probably should go about fixing it.
Yeah.
So having that, not necessarily just like highlighting stuff that's wrong, but also getting that explanation back. That, so I see that you mistyped the container image, because I think you meant to say Nginx, for instance. Like,
yeah.
stuff like that. Just highlighting. It's a great tool. There's so much stuff happening with AI. It's kind of hard to keep track of. But there are at least there were suggestions for AR products, and in the CNCF. I think Kubeflow is a relatively new project. It is not a relatively new project, but in the CNCF, I think it just got donated. If I don't.
Yep.
Like, again, so much stuff happening everywhere. It's really hard to keep track.
Yeah. Speaking of CNCF, we're both CNCF ambassadors. How has that contributed to your open source journey, or maybe just your making connections and stuff?
I would say that like getting these titles, well, first of all, they're great. They're something to work towards. I became an MVP because I actively wanted to become an MVP. Didn't necessarily understand what it was when I figured out there was something called an MVP, but it was one of those things. Yeah, I wanna be an MVP. And the same with the not necessarily the same, but one of the things that I checked up when I started working in CNCF in general was the ambassador program, which at that point the old one had stopped. So a little bit in flux there when it comes to what was going on next. And as soon as the first of the new CNCF ambassador program, as soon as the first they opened that, I was on it straight away. Nice. It is it's a different set of credentials. So you have experience. Experience might not necessarily mean that you know anything. You could work in a certain domain and not literally don't understand what's going on, because you kind of just worked and you never understood what's going on. So experience is kind of like a little bit shaded. Same with schools. Like you can pass school. Like I'm not able to pass exams and stuff like that, because again, ADHD. That doesn't necessarily mean that I don't know what I'm talking about when it comes to technical things, right?
Yep.
So people can pass exams but not necessarily understand what's going on. And I think we have to have a guest on, because she was she can't be alone for a second. So it's the same thing. It's like just yet another way to kind of prove yourself, or show that you do the breadth of what you can contribute and what you know. These awards usually, what I usually say when people ask about oh, you're a Microsoft MVP, so you in Azure, so you obviously know everything about Azure. It's like, well, not necessarily. It means that I share what I know. Like, it's a knowledge sharing part, right? You don't have to be an expert to become an MVP either, but it's the sum of everything. So having those kind of words in your name, as well as experience, as well as being part of different open source projects, that is kind of like the sum. And getting those rewards are well, is a great honor to have those awards and kind of get some these special titles. But it's also, like I said, it's just it makes sense when you see people that have those kind of awards, and you see what they do, and many of them do a lot of things, and they contribute a lot of time and effort into making sure that people are learning new things, helping people, mentoring people, creating, writing code that literally helps people get the job done easily. It is. I think it's a good thing to strive for, but don't necessarily just do it because you want the title. That's not going to work. You're going to get burned out.
Good point.
I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think what it's allowed me to do is just make more connections, but also leading people in a certain direction so that they can contribute more and feel like they have more power to be involved in some of these open source projects, and just in general, just that this world exists. This world exists where you can start not having any experience, get involved today with an open source project, start contributing today, and start gaining that experience, so that then you can go and make the world a better place. So it's really a lot of, in a lot of ways, it's more than a title, but it is kind of I hold it in high regard.
Yeah, I've been in meetings in the CNCF where someone is totally new to the CNCF. I have no clue it's really hard to look through all the different repositories in the CNCF GitHub and try to figure out what you're supposed to be doing at any point in time. So whenever that happens, I usually take some time outside of the meeting to talk with them directly and try to help them understand how the CNCF is built up. Again, and there's different things you can do. I recently joined the policy and growth committees in the Linux Foundation Europe. So there's a Cyber Resiliency Act, which is a hot topic with open source in Europe, and it obviously doesn't affect just Europeans. It also affects Americans or anyone anywhere else that are creating open source, because they made a kind of like a legislation where they consulted some open source experts, I guess you could say, but then didn't open it up to the community. So the Linux Foundation in Europe, there's a policy committee that started now, and like because of the Cyber Resiliency Act, just getting, I guess, combating silly decisions. Because again, it's hard enough with open source. It's a lot of gray areas. There's a lot of stuff happening everywhere in the open source ecosystem. Putting something like the Cyber Resiliency Act on top of it, making it hard to kind of justify open source in some aspects, makes no sense. Like we need to enable open source. Again, we wouldn't have anything we have now if it weren't for open source. It's literally what created our industry and everything that we have. I think it's a mistake to have those kind of laws and legislations that just disables people to do open source. So there's, again, not necessarily always code that you can contribute. There are other things you can contribute with, like your opinion and knowledge, which I think is as important as the code.
I agree. What have you been up to lately? What you said you've been pretty busy lately. What's the last talk that you've given, or community that you've been involved with?
So we have a lot of things going on. We have I personally in Norway we have something called the MVP Day. So the Microsoft MVPs have a conference that we're hosting. So I'm going to do that next week, I think. I'm not even sure at this point. And last week DevOps Days Oslo. Again, great set of conference. It's DevOps Days is a cool concept. It's not all technical. It's mostly like how to collaborate and get stuff done. This is a great thing to be part of creating. We are I think we just approved the pull request for the platform's maturity model, which we in the platforms working group have been working a lot on. So the idea is to have there was the cloud native maturity model, there's security maturity models, etc. And we had the platforms white paper, which kind of defined what a platform is. We had to kind of do that. We started off with this working group, and it's like, what is a platform? We probably should address that first. And now we have the maturity model. That's kind of like the logical next step. That has turned up. There's a lot of people that's been contributing to that, and it's been great being part of that. And the idea was to get at the first version out there before KubeCon North America. Because we did that with the white paper. We got that out before KubeCon Amsterdam, so we had something at KubeCon to kind of say, this is what we've been doing since last time. I'm part of, or the initiative taker, or whatever you want to call it, for KCD Oslo, or KCD Norway in Oslo. So we're going to have the 24th and 25th of January. We're going to have, which is great, just select the coldest month to have a KCD in Norway. So if you want to join, expect, I guess, minus 15 to minus 20, 25 degrees Celsius. That's going to be great.
That will attract a lot of people.
Yes. Well, some love that. I personally don't really, it's not the best month for me, but it is a month where nothing else is kind of happening. We have an issue in Oslo. There's a lot of conferences and stuff like that. It's hard to choose a spot where not everything else is happening. So January was, but it's already shaping up. The CFP is open. So if you want to try to speak at these things, the CFP is open. We have a lot of good submissions. The ticket sales open today, actually. So fresh off the press. So that one is going to be great. And in general, I talk at so many things that I don't really remember. I think I'm going to be at KCD Denmark. I just remembered. I'm going to talk about open source at an event in Stockholm, Sweden. So if you want to, feel free to check out my LinkedIn. I try to spam everything that I do out as much as possible.
Yeah, I see at KCD Oslo, one of your co-organizers is Christina Devochko, who's I've met before, and has a lot of great talks too. I would encourage people to check her out.
So she's kind of my partner in crime in a lot of these things. So we got together to create KCD Norway, and because of that, we had to have a non-profit organization. So we established Cloud Native Norway to do that. She's also, there's 2 CNCF ambassadors in Norway. It's me and her. And we'll both work at the same company, MS242. So we kind of ganged up together and do all the cloud native and open source things.
Yeah, it's a good partner to have.
Absolutely. It's one of the best.
Yeah. So where can people find out more about you and read your white papers and view your talks and all that kind of stuff?
I'm basically everywhere. I was starting to get a feel for Twitter, and then something happened. There's a guy who kind of took over that thing, so now I'm probably not going to be there anymore. But I'm on all the social medias, but I prefer LinkedIn, to be honest, at this point. I have not updated my events thing. Like I started trying to, again, they stay ADHD thing, right? So I started like listing all the events that I'm doing. That got tough for a while. So I would suggest just follow on LinkedIn, and if there is anything at all, just ask. Like I said, I have a problem saying no, so I'm probably going to help.
You're open, so everyone ask Robert to do everything and anything.
Yes, my girlfriend is going to love that.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, great. Well, it seems like you're involved in a lot of things, and you're definitely keeping busy. You got one KCD that you're organizing, one that you're speaking at, and so I would encourage folks to check that out. And are you going to KubeCon North America?
So I felt that since I went to KubeCon EU, that like I couldn't justify it. We are a startup, so getting the company to pay for that, like making the decision to go is one thing. Ticket price, I wouldn't know if I was lucky enough to get a speaker ticket at KubeCon EU. Not sure that would happen in North America, but so I didn't, because obviously Paris, there will always be Paris.
Yep.
Bad reference. But then turns out that it just landed basically in the week that me and my mom have a birthday on the same day.
Oh.
And she turns 80. And she felt that when she turns 80, she's going to go somewhere else. So the entire family is flying there. So nice. That's literally on KubeCon EU. So it would have to be KubeCon North America next year, unfortunately. So
yeah, no worries.
Long time to wait.
Yeah, that's an important thing to save up for, and certainly understand that. Family first in a lot of ways. So
I was even looking at how to fly from Lanzarote to Paris and back, and apparently it's possible. But I think the girlfriend would kill me if I just kind of left during the yeah. So don't do that. Family is important.
Yeah, right. You have to weigh the pros and cons.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're very appreciative that you joined here, and appreciate your time. Anything else you want to leave the folks with? I know we gave a lot of good gems about getting involved in open source and finding the community and all that. But anything else you want to add before we close?
Just in general, if there is anything, let me know. Again, the getting into CNCF or the Linux Foundation or any of these open source foundations or projects, it is tough to figure out sometimes. It's not, there's no silly questions. Just feel free to ask anything. I'll try to answer as much as possible, but it might be a little bit delayed answer depending on what's going on.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate you being available for that. All right. Well, thanks again for your time, and we'll check you out on LinkedIn, and everybody send their messages to Robert, and sign them up for more things.
Yep.
But thanks, Robert, for your time. I appreciate it. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
Bye, everyone.